Easter greetings to you. I'm happy to be with you for this Easter, even though it's from Berlin in Germany. Now, I have started this year actually to do a new translation of the Calendar of the Soul. So I would actually like to present the first verse to you today. I think it's important to stay with this task of translating because, of course, there is no one complete and correct translation for the Calendar of the Soul. It is tremendously difficult, and therefore it's good to have various translations and to try again to find fitting words. So, if we look at the verse for Easter, there are a number of things that come to us quite plainly, quite clearly. We realize that we're beginning a journey, a soul journey with the Calendar of the Soul, which leads us now from Easter to the heights of the sun in summer at St. John's time, and back again to the world, to the inner world of the human being, also very strongly in the winter time, and then rising again to Easter. So I think it's always very helpful not just to look at one verse, but to look at the two verses that belong together, that are, so to speak, opposite to each other. The verse which is on the outward journey, so to speak, towards the cosmos, and the journey which goes to the inner part of the human being. So these are verses which are actually opposite to each other. And the wonderful thing is, of course, that we have verses that are opposite to each other and nevertheless are next to each other. That is Holy Week and Easter week. They are just from the point of view of language, but from the meaning, from the situation they lead us to, they are complete opposites. And so if we look at these two verses, we will find in a way that they show us something very particular about this journey through the year, the beginning and the end, and at the same time belonging so closely together. Now, this journey we take part in with the Calendar of the Soul is, of course, not just for our enjoyment to connect to the Spirit and be content to do so, but to realize that the earth, the being of the earth, also needs our path, needs that humanity takes this path to the Spirit, actually to the common source of the realms of nature and of the human being, this path to the Spirit. And at the same time, as Rudolf Steiner also tells us, we will find the connection to the earth through the Calendar of the Soul. So in one way, it is leading us to the Spirit. In the other way, it is leading us to a recognition of our connection to the being of the earth. In the introduction, Rudolf Steiner says the following. He says, we will discover the delicate but vital threads connecting the human soul to the world into which it has been born. So they are vital, these threads. I think that's important, and probably one could say vital for the earth and for the human being. But at the same time, they are delicate threads. It is not to be taken as given that we are able to connect in this way. So it is a reciprocal process, but also one that is only possible out of our free will, not to be taken for granted, so to speak. And this reciprocal process is very closely connected to Easter, and we will find this in the verses of the calendar of the soul. I would just like to mention this briefly. In verse 3, so that's 3 weeks after Easter, and verse 50, 3 weeks before Easter. So we see that Easter is surrounded by this recognition, one could say, that it is a reciprocal process. Now, to look at the Easter verse, or both the Holy Week and the Easter verse, we can see in the German that there is a very interesting word at the beginning, wenn. Now, I think it's particularly important to see that in the original German, there is quite a hint, at least, of the conjunctive. It is, wenn doesn't just mean when, but it also means if. So there, this deed, this free deed, the will of the human being is spoken of. It is not to be taken for granted, but comes out of our will activity. So you see the importance that stands at the beginning of this path through the year, telling us how necessary our free will is, our path of practice through the year, both for the human being, but also for the earth itself. And if I may read these lines to underline, so to speak, this conjunctive sense in the translation that I made, then you'll see it says, when from the depths of soul, this is Holy Week, when from the depths of soul, or if from the depths of soul, the spirit turns to the life of worlds. If this takes place, from the depths of the soul, the spirit turns to the life of worlds. Then, you see, this conjunctive is quite clear here. If, then. It's not just when. If from the depths of soul, the spirit turns to the life of worlds, then from furthest heavens flow life forces into human form. These life forces only flow if the human will is active. And in a similar way, we have in verse 1, in the Easter verse, when from the world's wide realms the sun to human beholding speaks, and gladness rising from soul depths unites with light in seeing. It's not to be taken for granted. And here we see again this if, then. So I can just as well read if from the world's wide realms the sun to human beholding speaks. Beholding has to rise, to sense, to feel what is happening. And in this verse it says with gladness. I think that's also very important. Just for this Easter verse, this joy, this gladness comes into the verse. So if the worldwide realms speak to us, or the sun through the worldwide realms, then out of selfhood's sheaths, thoughts stream into the world afar. And this is what actually connects the human being to the spirit. So we have if, then. It is not to be taken for granted that the human being can connect to the spirit. Then, out of selfhood's sheaths, we have to leave ourself And this is a theme that, of course, goes through the first half, let's say, of the calendar of the soul, particularly around the time of Whitsun. This very strong theme of leaving ourselves in order to find ourselves. Not just leaving ourselves, but leaving ourselves in order to find ourselves. This is the week after Whitsun. So very important that we leave these selfhood's sheaths, this, let's say, lower being that we have, our habits and so on and so forth. We have to leave this in order to find our connection to the spirit. And of course, it is the being of the sun that accompanies us, so to speak, on this journey, that stands behind us or even shines through us. So this wonderful, almost hidden hint in the first verse of the calendar of the soul shows us how out of Easter, the being of the sun will accompany us on this journey to the threshold, across the threshold, and back again to these delicate but vital threads connecting us to the earth. So, although it's a matter of human will, it's a matter of not taking things for granted, but realizing our activity is asked for, our freedom, then we have to say, nevertheless, it is a time of joy. And these verses, I really feel, verses 52, the Holy Week, and Easter week, the first verse, really stand there almost like a portal, like pillars of a portal leading into this path. And there, I almost feel like trumpets are playing loudly, like in the apocalypse, as we pass through this portal towards the spirit. So maybe you'll allow me to read my translation of both verses, because I do feel it's important how they belong together. And of course, for Karl Koenig, it was so important that we actually don't just look at two verses belonging together, but four. So then we would have Easter and the week before Easter, Holy Week. And on the other side of the year, Michaelmas and the week after Michaelmas. These four verses belong together. So we can see, in a way, we have, let's say, at the top, reaching up to the spirit, we have Easter. Below, we have Holy Week, the ground on which we can stand in this week. And to the left and right, if I may say it like this, we have the Michaelmas verses like a balancing, a threefold balancing in this time of Easter. So this is the metamorphosis of the cross that Karl Koenig spoke about. But let me read my translation for these two verses. First, Holy Week. And I will use when, because I think the sound is correct. But remember that in the German, this conjunctive is very strongly present. When from the depths of soul the spirit turns to the life of worlds, and beauty wells from widths of space, then from furthest heavens flow life forces into human form, uniting by its mighty strength, spirit essence with the human being. And for Easter week, when from the world's wide realms the sun to human beholding speaks, and gladness rising from soul depths unites with light in seeing, then out of selfhood's sheaths thoughts stream into the world afar, and dimly bind the human being with spirit being. And with this, I would really like to wish you a very good and fruitful Easter time together. Thank you and goodbye.